She was just a tired waitress serving coffee to strangers until one quiet customer revealed he was a billionaire. And her life changed forever. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and fried bacon every morning. But for her, it was less about the smell and more about survival. She tied her apron tightly around her waist, tucked a pencil behind her ear, and forced a smile onto her face before stepping out to greet the first wave of customers. It wasn't that she loved being a waitress. It was that she had no choice. Rent was due, bills were piling up, and her mother's medicine wasn't cheap. She worked the early shift at the diner, and when she could, she picked up evening hours at a small grocery store across town. Every day felt like a race she could never win, but she kept moving forward. She was young, not even 30 yet. But her eyes carried the weight of someone who had been fighting life for far too long. Still, people liked her. She always greeted customers with a smile, asked about their day, and remembered small details. Like how Mr. Johnson liked his eggs over easy, or how Mrs. Miller couldn't drink coffee past noon. Those little things made people feel welcome, and in return, they left her tips that helped keep the lights on at home. It wasn't much, but it was something. Her apartment was small. It was barely big enough for her and her mother, but she made it work. At night, she would often sit by her mom's bedside, checking her temperature, making sure she had taken her pills, and then quietly tiptoeing away to cry in the kitchen where her mom couldn't hear. She didn't want her mother to know how hard things were. She wanted her to believe that everything was under control, even when it wasn't. The truth was, it was never under control. She was behind on rent again, and the landlord was growing impatient. The bills from the hospital visits were stacked high in a drawer she could barely open anymore. She ate little herself, saving what she could for her mom, telling her she had already eaten when she hadn't. Yet, even with all this, she walked into the diner each morning with a smile and energy that made people feel like she had no worries at all. One Thursday morning, when the diner was busier than usual, a man walked in and sat at the corner booth near the window. She noticed him because he was alone, quiet, and didn't pull out a phone or newspaper like most people did. He simply sat there, looking around, as if he had all the time in the world. She gave him the same warm smile she gave everyone else and brought him a menu. He ordered a simple breakfast black coffee and toast, and she didn't think much of it. People came and went all the time, but the man kept coming back. At first, once a week, then more often. Always sitting in the same corner booth, always ordering something simple, and always watching the room quietly. He wasn't creepy about it, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but it was noticeable. He seemed to study the place, and sometimes she caught him watching her. Whenever she looked his way, he would nod politely or smile faintly, but he never said much. She figured he was just lonely. Maybe he lived nearby and liked the company of a busy diner. Her coworkers teased her a little. "Your secret admirer's back," one of the cooks joked one morning, jerking his head toward the corner booth. She rolled her eyes, laughing it off. She didn't have time to think about admirers. She had bills to pay, and if she didn't pick up extra hours that weekend, she'd be short on rent again. It wasn't just money that kept her awake at night. She worried constantly about her mother. The medicine worked, but only if she could afford to refill it every month. Skipping a dose wasn't an option. Sometimes she wondered if life would ever be different. If she would ever get the chance to go back to school, find a better job, maybe even have a life that wasn't just about scraping by. But those thoughts never lasted long. Reality always cut them short. For now, her world was the diner, the grocery store, and home. Still, she refused to let her struggles change the way she treated people. A tired truck driver came in one morning, grumpy and short-tempered. She brought his food without complaint, even refilled his coffee twice, though he didn't say thank you. When he left, she smiled and told him to drive safe. Later, a young couple came in with their baby. She cooed at the little one, making the parents laugh, and slipped them an extra muffin on the house. She didn't make much, but those small acts of kindness made her feel like she had control over something. The man in the corner booth seemed to notice everything she did. He watched how she handled rude customers with patience, how she carried heavy trays without complaining, how she smiled even when her feet must have been aching. She didn't notice his eyes following her every move because, to her, he was just another customer. One night, after her shift, she trudged home with aching legs and sore arms. Her shoes were falling apart, but she couldn't afford new ones just yet. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft sound of her mother's breathing. She sat in the dark for a while, staring at the stack of bills on the table, wondering how much longer she could keep going like this. She didn't know it yet, but someone had already noticed her strength and kindness. Someone had already begun to wonder how he could change her life at that moment. She was just a waitress, exhausted and worried, clinging to hope. She had no idea that her future was being shaped by the quiet man who kept sitting at the corner booth. The man in the corner booth became part of the diner's rhythm. Like the hum of the coffee machine or the clatter of plates in the kitchen, he always came in quietly, never in a rush, and always chose the same seat by the window. At first, the waitress thought little of it. Plenty of customers had their favorite spots. But as the weeks went by, she realized he was coming more often than anyone else. Some days he came in the morning, other days at lunch, and sometimes in the evening when she worked double shifts. His face became familiar, yet he remained a mystery. He ordered simple meals, never more than coffee, toast, or a sandwich. He wasn't picky, and he never complained about the food. He didn't chat much with the staff or other customers. His quiet presence stood out in a diner where people usually laughed, argued, or hurried through meals. She started to recognize his habits, the way he stirred his coffee slowly, how he folded his napkin neatly before leaving, and how he always tipped generously without making a show of it. Her coworkers noticed too. One of the other waitresses nudged her one afternoon and whispered, "Your friend is back again." She just laughed and brushed it off, saying he was probably just lonely. "Maybe he doesn't have anyone at home," she said. The cook teased her that she had a secret admirer, but she shook her head. She couldn't even think about things like that. Romance, or whatever they were hinting at, had no place in her life. Survival came first. Even as she dismissed their jokes, she couldn't help but feel a little curious. Why did this man keep coming back? She didn't think she was special. She was just doing her job, bringing food, refilling coffee, and keeping the place running smoothly. Still, he always seemed to watch her more closely than anyone else. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that felt thoughtful. Outside of work, her problems were growing heavier. The landlord had given her another warning about rent. He wasn't a bad man, but business was business, and he couldn't let her stay much longer if she didn't catch up. Her mother's medicine needed to be refilled soon, and the thought of not being able to afford it made her chest tighten with panic. She didn't want her mom to know how bad things were. At home, she smiled and acted as if everything was fine. But inside, she felt like she was drowning. Back at the diner, she kept her mask on. A customer snapped at her because his order took too long, and she apologized politely, even though it wasn't her fault. Another customer left without tipping, and she shrugged it off as if it didn't matter, though she counted every dollar carefully at the end of each day. The man in the corner booth noticed these things. He watched her patience, her steady smile, her kindness, even when she was treated unfairly. She didn't know it, but he was studying her character. One day when the diner was slow, he struck up a conversation. It surprised her, because until then, he had been almost silent, only speaking to order. He asked her how long she'd been working there. She told him it had been years, longer than she ever expected. He asked if she liked it, and she answered honestly. It wasn't easy, but it paid the bills. She didn't complain, though she could have. He listened carefully, nodding, and then fell quiet again. Her coworkers teased her after he left, saying he was finally opening up to her. She rolled her eyes and went back to wiping down tables. She didn't think much of their talk. In her mind, he was just a lonely older man who came in because the diner gave him company. But life outside the diner grew harder. One evening, after a late shift, she checked her mailbox and found another overdue notice. She sighed, folded it, and stuffed it deep into her bag. There was no time to cry about it. She had to head to her second job at the grocery store. She barely had time to eat before her next shift. Her body ached constantly, her feet sore, her back stiff. But she kept going. The next morning, the man was there again, sipping coffee at his usual spot. She greeted him with the same warm smile she gave everyone, hiding her exhaustion. He noticed the tiredness in her eyes, though she tried to cover it up. He noticed how she still joked with the regulars, still took the time to ask the older customers about their health, still treated every person as if they mattered that day. A family came in with restless kids who spilled juice on the table and dropped crumbs everywhere. Instead of showing annoyance, she brought extra napkins, made silly faces to calm the children, and made the parents laugh in relief. The man in the corner booth watched carefully. He saw that her kindness wasn't an act she turned on for certain people, it was genuine. Later that same week, she came to work looking more worried than usual. She tried to hide it, but her hands shook a little as she poured coffee. The landlord had left another note at her door, and she didn't know how she was going to manage. Yet when a customer complained that his eggs were too runny, she smiled, apologized, and brought him another plate without a trace of frustration. The man in the booth noticed again. She didn't realize it, but she had become the center of his quiet attention. While she was busy balancing trays and remembering orders, he was studying her resilience. She thought she was invisible to the world, just another waitress in a small diner, but he saw something rare. He saw a woman who carried heavy burdens, yet refused to let them turn her bitter. Still, she never guessed who he really was. To her, he was just a polite man with kind eyes, who tipped well and liked simple meals. She had no idea that behind his calm appearance was someone with the power to change her life completely. She couldn't have imagined that the man sitting in the corner booth, sipping his coffee, was already planning something that would shift her world in ways she never thought possible. For now, she simply wiped tables, refilled coffee, and kept moving forward, unaware that her quiet strength was being noticed by someone who had the means to transform her life forever. The night was unusually busy at the diner. Orders kept piling up, coffee cups were emptied almost as soon as they were filled, and the sound of forks clinking against plates mixed with voices that filled every corner of the room. She moved quickly between the tables, balancing trays, writing orders, and trying to keep up. Her feet ached from the morning shift, but she pushed through. It was nothing new. She had learned to work past exhaustion, toward the back of the diner. The man in the corner booth sat quietly as always, sipping his coffee and watching. He blended into the background, but he noticed everything. That night, something happened that tested her patience more than usual. A man came in alone, looking grumpy from the start. He complained about the booth he was given, demanded to be moved, and then scowled at the menu, as if everything on it offended him. She went to his table with her usual smile and asked what he would like to order. He snapped at her, saying the prices were too high. The food was probably terrible, and she should hurry because he didn't have all night. She nodded politely, wrote down his order, and hurried to the kitchen. When she brought his food, he frowned, poked at it, and called her over again. "This isn't what I asked for," he barked, even though it was exactly what he had ordered. She apologized, offered to fix it, and took the plate back with calm patience. By the time she returned with a fresh meal, he had already decided he was unhappy with everything. He ate only a little and left a crumpled bill on the table without a tip. She sighed when he walked out. But instead of complaining, she cleared the table quickly and kept moving. Her coworkers rolled their eyes and whispered about rude customers, but she didn't join in. She simply said, maybe he was having a hard day, and went back to work. The man in the corner booth heard her words and saw the way she handled the situation without anger. He was impressed by how she never let frustration show, not even for a moment. Later that evening, after the rush had slowed down, she felt the weight of the day catch up with her. She leaned against the counter for just a second, stretching her sore back. The clock on the wall told her it would be another late night before she finally made it home. She didn't notice the man in the booth watching her closely, noticing the quiet strength she carried. When her shift finally ended, she gathered her things and stepped out into the cool night air. The parking lot was nearly empty, lit by a few flickering street lamps. She walked toward her old car, dragging her tired feet, only to find that it wouldn't start. She tried turning the key again and again, but the engine made a sad sputtering noise and went silent. She let out a long breath and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. It felt like one more problem on top of a mountain she couldn't climb. As she sat there wondering what to do, she heard a voice. Car trouble? It startled her. She looked up and saw the man from the corner booth standing a few feet away. He was holding his jacket closed against the night breeze, his expression calm. She hesitated before nodding. Yeah, it just won't start. It's old, she admitted, embarrassed. He stepped closer but didn't invade her space. Do you want me to call a tow truck for you? He asked politely. She shook her head at first. No, it's fine. I'll figure something out. But she could hear the doubt in her own voice. She didn't have the money for a tow truck that night, and even if she did, she wasn't sure how she would pay for repairs. He didn't press her. He simply pulled out his phone and said, "It won't take long. Let me help." Something in his tone was steady and kind, not pushy. After a moment, she nodded reluctantly, whispering a quiet thank you. He made the call, and they waited together in the cool night. They didn't talk much, but he asked if she lived far and if she had someone to call. She explained briefly that she lived nearby with her mother and that she worked 2 jobs. She didn't share much more. She wasn't used to opening up. He listened carefully, though nodding without interrupting. When the tow truck arrived, she felt both relieved and embarrassed. She didn't like being in situations where she had to rely on others. She thanked him again as the car was loaded up. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. He gave her a small smile and replied, Sometimes we all need a little help. She went home that night, still worried about how she would afford the repair, but strangely comforted by the man's quiet kindness. She didn't know who he really was or why he came to the diner so often. To her, he was just a customer who had gone out of his way to help when he didn't have to. She didn't think it meant anything more, but to him it was another moment that revealed who she truly was. Even in hardship, she was humble, polite, and grateful. She hadn't asked for help, hadn't complained, and hadn't tried to gain pity. She simply kept moving forward, carrying her struggles with quiet dignity. The next day, she was back at the diner, wearing the same tired shoes, smiling at the same customers, pretending everything was fine. The man in the corner booth was there too, sipping his coffee and watching as always. She didn't realize it, but each small moment was shaping what was coming next. Each act of kindness, each bit of patience, each show of strength was being noticed by someone who had the power to change her life in ways she never dreamed possible. For now, she thought of him as nothing more than a kind stranger, but he had already decided she was someone worth helping, someone whose life deserved to be different. She had no idea that her future was already being written quietly in the background. While she carried on serving coffee and smiling through her struggles, the diner was quieter than usual that afternoon. Sunlight poured in through the windows, casting long shadows across the tables, and the sound of clinking silverware and low chatter filled the air. She moved from table to table with her usual energy, balancing plates and refilling coffee cups, but there was a nervous tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. Something felt different today, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The man in the corner booth, as always, watched quietly. Today, however, there was a subtle shift in the way he looked at her. He didn't just observe her actions anymore. He seemed to be thinking, weighing something important, as if he had reached a decision. She didn't notice it. She was too busy keeping the customers happy, laughing politely at jokes she didn't find funny, and wiping the tables with practiced efficiency. When she brought him his usual coffee and toast, he finally spoke in a calm, deliberate tone. "I'd like to talk to you for a moment," he said. Her eyes widened slightly, and she glanced at the other tables, suddenly aware of her own nervous energy. He gestured toward an empty booth across from him. She hesitated, then nodded. Carefully setting down the tray she had been holding, sitting down felt unusual, almost surreal. She had no idea what he was about to say. He smiled gently, and for a moment the diner noises seemed to fade into the background. "I've been coming here for some time," he began, "and I've noticed you." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "Not just the way you work, but the way you treat people, the way you carry yourself under pressure, the patience you show, even when things are difficult. It's rare." She swallowed hard, feeling her cheeks warm. I don't know what to say," she murmured. She wasn't used to receiving compliments, especially not in such a serious tone from a stranger she thought of as just a diner customer. He continued, I want you to know that what you do doesn't go unnoticed. Many people see the surface, the work you do, the smile you put on, but I see more. I see your strength, your kindness, and your resilience. And I want to help. Her heart skipped a beat. She shook her head slowly, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Help. I don't understand. She felt a wave of skepticism mixed with hope. People said things all the time, but they rarely meant them. She had learned not to trust empty words. He leaned back slightly and smiled warmly. I don't just want to help. I can help. I have the means to make your life easier, to give you opportunities you might never have imagined. I want to help you because you deserve it. You've shown qualities that are rare, and I believe you have potential that shouldn't be limited by circumstances. She shook her head again, her mind racing. Was this some kind of joke? A scam? She had seen enough of the world to know that offers like this usually came with hidden strings attached. But something in his calm demeanor, the way he had quietly observed her for weeks, made her pause. He wasn't asking for anything in return. He wasn't trying to impress her with money or status. He was simply recognizing her value. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly blinked them away, hoping he didn't notice. I don't know what to say, she whispered. No one has ever. I've struggled so much, and I just don't know how this is possible. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This is just a start, he said. I want you to pay off the debts that have been weighing on you so you don't have to worry about them anymore. And beyond that, I want to offer you an opportunity in education, a career path, something that can change your life if you choose to take it. She stared at the envelope, feeling a mix of disbelief, fear, and hope. She could see the numbers inside, the overdue rent, the bills, the medical expenses, and her heart raced. She had spent countless nights wondering how she would ever manage to pay all of it. And now someone had simply erased it, without judgment, without questions. I don't know what to say, she repeated, her voice trembling. She felt a weight lifting off her shoulders, a heaviness she hadn't even realized she had carried every single day for years. The constant anxiety, the endless worry, it was all beginning to dissolve. She had never imagined a moment like this could happen. He smiled again, softly. You don't have to say anything yet. Just know that this is genuine. I've watched how you live, the choices you make, and I believe in you. I think you can achieve things that would surprise even yourself. I want to give you the chance. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up the envelope. The diner around them seemed both familiar and foreign at the same time. This place, where she had spent years serving meals and working tirelessly, suddenly felt like the starting point of something entirely new. She thought about her mother, the worry lines etched into her face every time she looked at bills or medicine. This could change everything. I don't even know how to thank you, she said finally, her voice soft but full of emotion. I never expected. No one has ever... She trailed off, unable to find the right words. You don't have to thank me, he said. Just take this opportunity and use it. Prove to yourself what you're capable of. That's all I ask. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at him, the envelope, and the world outside the diner window. It all felt surreal, almost like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. She thought of the long hours she had spent working, the sacrifices she had made, the endless stress and worry, and she realized that someone had finally seen it all of it. Someone had recognized her strength, her perseverance, and her character. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I'll do my best, she whispered. I promise I won't waste this. He nodded. I know you won't. That's why I chose you. You've shown qualities that can't be taught: kindness, resilience, and determination. These things will take you far, and now you'll have the chance to use them without the constant weight of worry holding you back. As she left the diner that day, envelope in hand, she felt a mixture of disbelief and hope. The world outside felt brighter somehow. Even the streets she had walked 1,000 times seemed different. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe freely. Like the walls of stress and anxiety were finally cracking. She went home that evening and showed her mother the envelope, explaining as best as she could without letting the tears fall too quickly. Her mother stared at her, speechless, tears forming in her eyes as well. For the first time, they could see a future that wasn't clouded by constant worry. For the first time, they could imagine a life where the struggles of every day didn't dominate every thought. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, looking at the stack of bills that had once seemed insurmountable, now suddenly conquerable. She could hardly believe it. A simple act of noticing, a recognition of her character by someone she had assumed was just another diner customer, had transformed the course of her life. She realized something important. It wasn't just about the money or the opportunities. It was about being seen, being truly noticed for who she was, for her efforts, her patience, and her kindness. And that recognition had opened a door she never even knew existed. The man in the corner booth, the quiet observer, had done more than offer financial help. He had offered belief in her potential, in her character, in her ability to rise above the struggles that had defined her life for so long. That belief, she realized, was even more powerful than the money in the envelope. It was the first step toward a future she had only dreamed about. A future where she could take control of her life in ways she hadn't dared to imagine before. The days that followed were unlike anything she had ever experienced. She woke up for her shifts at the diner with a lighter heart. The exhaustion was still there, her feet still ached, and her life still had responsibilities, but something had changed deep inside her. She had hope, real hope, for the first time in years. Every morning as she tied her apron, she felt a sense of purpose that went beyond just surviving. She was no longer only working to pay bills. She was working toward a future that could finally be hers. She started by paying off the overdue rent. Walking into the landlord's office with the envelope in hand, she felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. The landlord, a man who had always been patient but firm, looked at her with surprise as she handed him the money. "Everything is covered," she said softly, trying not to let the emotion show in her voice. His eyebrows rose in astonishment. "Paid in full?" he asked. She nodded, and for the first time. She left his office without the knot of worry in her chest that had been there for months. Next, she took care of her mother's medical bills. She went to the pharmacy, her hands trembling slightly as she handed over the envelope. For the first time in years, she didn't have to make a difficult choice between food and medicine, between necessities and survival. Her mother, who had always worried silently about their financial situation, watched with tears in her eyes as her daughter explained everything. "I don't know what to say," her mother whispered. "I've never seen anything like this." Her life began to shift in small but profound ways. The man from the diner had not only erased her debts, he had offered her an opportunity she never thought she would have a chance to go back to school and finish her education. At first, the idea was intimidating. She had spent so many years working just to survive that the thought of studying again seemed almost impossible. But with his encouragement, she began to see it as a door opening. A path that could take her far beyond the diner and her small apartment. She enrolled in a program she had dreamed about, but had always believed was out of reach. Each class she attended, each assignment she completed, filled her with confidence she hadn't felt before. She studied late into the night, often after long shifts, but the exhaustion was different now. It was fueled by determination rather than worry. For the first time, learning felt like a privilege, not a burden. Meanwhile, the man continued to check in quietly, never imposing, always supportive. He offered guidance when needed, advice without pressure, and encouragement at every step. She began to understand that he wasn't just changing her circumstances, he was helping her see her own worth. She had spent so many years doubting herself, believing she would never have a life beyond struggle. But now, someone with the power to change her life had placed his trust in her, and that trust became a mirror reflecting the strength she had inside all along. One day, he offered her a job in one of his companies. It was a position that allowed her to use her skills, her patience, her intelligence qualities she hadn't recognized as valuable before. She was nervous at first, feeling the familiar fear of stepping into a world she didn't belong to. But he reminded her that she had already proven her resilience, that her character was more important than experience, and that he believed in her ability to succeed. Her first day at the new job was overwhelming. She walked into a sleek office building, a world so different from the diner where she had spent years, serving coffee and toast. The staff were polished, the technology advanced, the pace fast. She felt out of place, but she reminded herself of the man's words and took a deep breath. Slowly, she began to adapt. Her natural kindness, her patience, and her ability to remain calm under pressure made her stand out. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. As weeks turned into months, her confidence grew. She began to see opportunities she had never noticed before. She spoke up in meetings, offered ideas, and helped clients with empathy and intelligence that impressed everyone. Her life, once limited to the small world of the diner and her struggles, had expanded into a future full of possibilities. The man who had noticed her kindness had opened a door, but it was her own courage and character that allowed her to walk through it fully. Back at home, the changes were just as profound. She was able to care for her mother without fear, providing comfort, stability, happiness in a way she had only dreamed of. Their apartment, once cramped and stressful, became a home filled with laughter and relief. They no longer counted pennies to make ends meet, and the constant stress that had shadowed their lives lifted. Her mother often hugged her tightly, whispering, "I don't know how to thank you enough," and she would smile, realizing that the gratitude belonged to the quiet man who had believed in her, and also to herself for not giving up. Even at the diner, she remained a regular. She visited sometimes to see the old coworkers she had spent years with, sharing a friendly smile and stories of her new life. She never forgot the nights of exhaustion, the endless stress, the small moments of kindness that had defined her life before everything changed. Those memories reminded her where she came from, keeping her humble and grounded. Even as her world expanded in ways she had never imagined through it all, she learned a valuable lesson, that small acts of kindness, patience, and perseverance do not go unnoticed. Even when life feels unfair, when it seems like no one is watching or caring, there are people who see, appreciate, and believe in you. And sometimes, all it takes is one person noticing your worth to change your life completely. The man who had once simply sat quietly in the corner booth, watching her serve meals and refill coffee, had transformed her life forever. But it wasn't just his help, it was the recognition of her character, the belief in her potential, and the chance to rise above the struggles that had defined her existence for so long. She had been given an opportunity, yes, but she had earned her new life through years of resilience, kindness, and determination that never faltered. Even in the darkest moments, by the time she looked back on the years of struggle, she realized that everything had led her to this moment. The long hours at the diner, the nights of worry, the patience she had shown to customers and strangers alike, it all mattered. Each small act of grace, each quiet decision to keep going despite the weight of life, had built a foundation for a future she had never dared to imagine, and as she stepped into that future, she did so with confidence, gratitude, and a heart full of hope. She had been a waitress who thought her life would always be defined by struggle, but she became a woman with choice, freedom, and opportunity. Her life was transformed forever, not just by the generosity of a stranger, but by the strength she had always carried within herself. For the first time, she understood that kindness, resilience, and patience were not just virtues, they were powerful forces that could change the course of a life, sometimes in ways one could never predict. She smiled at the thought, knowing that her story had only just begun, and that the world she had once believed was too small for her dreams was now wide open. Full of possibilities, she was ready to embrace.